Catch a glimpse of the Earth that has only been seen before by a few. Watch these exceptional people contribute to the cutting edge of research and test the bounds of human endurance. Achievement, danger, excitement, and fame. It's all in a day's work for an astronaut. If you're an adult man or woman in excellent physical condition who meets the basic qualifications, you could be selected for astronaut training. Pilot astronauts are taken from the military. They need a strong background in aeronautics. Mission and payload specialists are civilians that come from the fields of medicine or science. But of the thousands who apply every year, only a handful are selected.
Whenever we say we want some astronauts, we get hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of applicants. It's easy to go fishing in a pool that's this deep. You know, we pick 20 or 25 every couple years. Are superb individuals. Maverick isn't exactly what you want, and you don't want a computer nerd or something. You don't want somebody that's very, very good in just one subject and not broad. So what we look for is somebody who is, of course, intelligent and willing to work hard and, in fact, subvert their own desires for somebody else's, because in many cases you carry somebody else's science up into orbit and do their work. Somebody who can get along in a team situation and behave pretty well in an emergency.
Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Eileen Collins is one of the lucky few chosen to enter astronaut training.
When I first decided I wanted to be an astronaut, it was such a far-off, wild dream. I was embarrassed to tell anybody that I wanted to do it. Of course, back then, as a youngster, there were only men astronauts.
Collins is training to be a pilot on the space shuttle. She is learning to fly the T-38 aircraft, which simulates shuttle landings. Before she was selected for pilot training, she had to log in 1,000 hours in a high-performance jet aircraft. These planes fly at about 2,000 miles per hour, 3 times faster than a commercial airliner.
Well, as a shuttle pilot, we need to keep up our proficiency in between shuttle flights and before our first shuttle flight. Predominantly, we fly the T-38. We fly about 10 times a month. Keeping your hands on the stick and throttles.
Most of the astronaut training takes place at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas.
Well, the Johnson Space Center is the place that astronauts live and work. It's the place where people prepare for the missions, where the astronauts are trained, where the missions are simulated, and ultimately when the orbiter is in space, where the missions are controlled.
In simulators, shuttle crews run through entire missions, complete with technical problems.
Now, when we do the simulator training, we have an astronaut crew in the actual simulator itself. We have a training crew, which is down at the console, and they have a script that they have written ahead of time on a list of malfunctions that they're going to input into the simulator. And then we have flight controllers over in mission control, and they don't know what kind of malfunctions are coming. And the astronaut crew doesn't know what's coming.
Now they've survived at this part, let's let them land.
An especially important part of the astronaut's training is learning to cope with zero gravity. The weightlessness of the outer space is simulated in an airplane called the KC-135. Trainees are weightless for up to 30 seconds at a time. The KC-135, often referred to as the Vomit Comet, helps the astronauts to adjust to one of the biggest problems of space travel, nausea. Trainees also learn how the spacecraft itself feels in reduced gravity by working inside an enormous mock-up of the shuttle that's submerged in water. It's called the Neutral Buoyancy Water Tank. The rigorous training program at Johnson Space Center is 1 year long. After finishing the course, candidates become regular members of the astronaut corps. About a year later, they'll be eligible for a flight assignment. That's when the excitement begins.
This is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 2 hours, 6 minutes.
The average shuttle mission has a crew of 7. This includes the mission commander, the pilot, the payload specialist, and the mission specialist. Each astronaut has been trained for a specific job on the mission. On launch day, all the hard-earned training is put to the test. After the astronauts are dressed by the suit technician, they wait for liftoff, the most frightening and dangerous part of space travel.
Launch is very fast, it is very violent, it is very noisy. It's basically vibrations and noise. I'm scared of launches, I'm scared to death of launches. I really don't like doing them, but I accept them, and I accept that risk. Space is my calling.
Imagine being strapped to a machine with 8 million pounds of explosive force under you. If anything does go wrong during launch, the crew must be ready to react instantly. There are 4 different abort procedures. Depending on what goes wrong, the shuttle can make an emergency landing in Spain, Africa, California, or back at Kennedy.
What will we do if we lose an engine at this point? Will we return to Kennedy, or will we continue to Africa? Or will we go to Spain? Or, will we have to dump fuel from our orbital maneuvering engines if we lose an engine at this point, or not dump fuel? And what orbit will we go to? And, so there's all these things that you have to be staying ahead of the vehicle on, thinking if the next malfunction occurs, what do I do?
When the shuttle reaches orbit, the fuel tank falls away. The main engines are shut off. The steady thrust from the rockets is suddenly replaced by a feeling of weightlessness.
Closing my eyes just as the engine shut down, I was, of course, in free fall. It's rather abrupt from having a 3G push in which you weigh 3 times. I weigh roughly 460 pounds or so, to 0G into free fall. Just a magical experience.
The astronauts do not follow the same clock as we do back on Earth. If the shuttle needs to dock with another spacecraft, a satellite, probe, or space station, it must launch at a specific time so that they can rendezvous in orbit. So if a shuttle launches at night, the astronauts' workday may begin at 10 p.m. Central Time. Even though the sun comes up every hour and a half in space, the astronauts follow a 24-hour cycle. They spend 8 to 12 hours working on their primary experiment, sleep in 7-hour shifts, conduct smaller experiments, exercise, eat, and bathe. Depending on the mission, the commander and pilot fly the shuttle during orbit, pointing it with a view to the Earth, the Sun, or to deep space. They also steer the shuttle to perform satellite deployment and retrieval maneuvers. The mission specialists are responsible for coordinating shuttle operations, including crew activity planning, food and drink, and payload operations. They also perform spacewalks and operate the robot arm. The payload specialists oversee the operations of specific experiments. One of the ongoing research experiments is performed on the astronauts themselves. No one knows what prolonged exposure to zero gravity does to a person's health, but scientists do know about short-term effects.
Right now, what we can identify is that there are risks, both for things such as bone loss, muscle loss, equilibrium changes, blood pressure changes, heart muscle changes. We're trying to see what those risks are.
I'm ready to go to work.
See you guys on the ground. Going home?
Back on Earth, after days or weeks of being weightless, the astronauts must readjust to the pull of gravity.
And so there's a real adaptation when you get back down on the ground. You feel like you weigh about 300 pounds when you come back down and land. So you're going to notice the guys moving a little bit sluggishly, a little bit heavily, particularly this flight where they're at the end of 14 days of being up there.
Becoming an astronaut is not only an exercise in endurance, it requires enormous commitment and many sacrifices.
Without a doubt, the hardest part is what I do and what I enjoy doing. Is it worth the risk to my family? because I love my family dearly, and I have 3 small daughters, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old now, and when you kiss them goodbye 7 days prior to your scheduled launch as you go into quarantine, because you're not allowed to see your children in quarantine, that's a difficult night. Very difficult.
Flying in space will always be a risky business. Even back on Earth, astronauts are reminded of their dangerous occupation.
An insurance salesman called me up. I surprised him. I said, yes, I am interested in life insurance, what he called. And he said, oh, great. I could tell it's probably the 1 in 100 that he'd got that day. And I said, how old are you? And do you smoke? No. Good physical condition? Yes. And great. And what's your occupation? I said, well, I'm an astronaut. Dead silence on the phone.
To an astronaut, the rewards outweigh the risks. Space travel offers an opportunity to explore a whole new frontier. Are you up for the challenge?